What is going on, Governor Chisgule here, and today we're going to rank each of the legendary commanders. Which one is the best investment? Which one is the least most exciting investment? Well, you're going to want to stick around to find out. Hello, my friends. Welcome back. We're going to be answering the question of which legendary cavalry commander is best to invest in. We're going to look at each one, offer you some optimal pairings, and rank them from 6 to 1. Now, if you like Rise of Kingdoms commander guides, you should like and subscribe. We've got a bunch of videos covering commanders and how to get the most bang for your buck, or if you don't spend money at all, how to optimize the heck out of this game. So like and subscribe if that's what you're into, and let's get right into the list. This list was inspired by the video we made yesterday ranking all of the epic cavalry commander pairings, and I thought, gosh, if we were going to pick one epic and one legendary and smash them together, like what would some of those pairings be, and which legendary would be the one best legendary to invest in? Now let's start at the bottom of the list, and it should not be too surprising that the recently nerfed Attila, he is the number 6 least exciting investment, in my opinion, at this exact moment in Rise of Kingdoms. Card up in the top where we talk about how he was totally nerfed. He was extremely powerful. He was so strong that he was a must-have rally leader. People are starting to understand that he's kind of a one-trick pony. If you swarm him, you're going to get wrecked, so just don't swarm him and enjoy your free win. Attila is the number 6 recommendation, in my opinion, for a commander to expertise in Rise of Kingdoms. And yeah, as far as legendary commanders go, I think you've got some better options. Now, if you were gun-ho about Attila, what would be the best epic commanders to pair with him? I would make the argument that commanders that generate a lot of rage but don't have a lot of skill damage would be a great pick. Unfortunately, there's not really a lot of commanders that are like that. That is because Attila is going to reduce the skill damage that your own troops are going to deal, which is fairly problematic. So I suppose if you wanted to make a sort of tanky march, you could use a Scipio. That would be kind of an interesting choice because he doesn't do any skill damage. You could use a Joan of Arc secondary to generate rage. Kind of a weird combo to have in the open field, but you could do it. I would kind of rather see other commanders in as the primary if that's really what you're going to do. You can see I'm struggling here with what an optimal epic pair would be. Attila has a diminished role in Rise of Kingdoms, and that will likely only continue to diminish even when archers become more popular. Snapping in my opinion, the number 5 investment for legendary cavalry commanders in Rise of Kingdoms is going to be Takeda. Now you may be saying, whoa, wait a minute, Chisgule, don't you use Takeda? You're gosh darn right. I use Takeda, in part because I have him expertise, in part because he is pretty cool with a rage engine. His third skill is going to fire off more frequently if you generate more rage. That's because it's tied to your active skill. And it does do a solid amount of healing, and there are a lot of stats on this commander. Because Attila was recently nerfed, his role as a rally combo, Attila Takeda, is diminished. I still think he does some really awesome stuff. I still think he's a phenomenal commander overall. But if I'm picking one legendary cavalry commander to invest in, it's not going to be this guy who cares a lot about normal attack damage. And now that Attila is kind of nerfed, him and Attila can be off in a corner doing whatever it is that they're going to do. I'll tell you, it ain't much. And so we are moving on past this commander. Again, he's still in my own Canyon lineup. However, I am kind of struggling to find amazing uses for him. He needs desperately to have a rage engine. And you could pair him with other legendary cavalry commanders. And let's talk about what epics you would use if you were gung-ho about Takeda. If you were gung-ho about Takeda, I would say you would want to pick an epic that is going to generate a lot of rage, and I do mean a lot of rage, to take the most advantage of the fact that you'll get more healing if you do that. And that is a substantial amount of healing. I mean, we have this basically Not constantly going off when we pair him with Khan, which is another legendary, but pretty much the majority of the time in our Sunset Canyon match, Takeda's healing. It's amazing. So if you're picking a pair, I would say Boudica is an interesting choice because she's got the skill tree. I think the support tree is a good bit better, though. In that regard, Joan of Arc is kind of an interesting choice for a tankier cavalry march. I think that Pelagius is a fine choice because he's going to generate a ton of rage, which I think will be really quite effective. That comes from the first skill. He also does a bunch of healing. So I think Pelagius and Takeda would be a pretty solid combo if you're looking at the epic tier. Okay, getting back to the list of legendary cavalry commanders. My number 4 pick for legendary cavalry commander investments is going to be Cao Cao. Now, Cao Cao is a mobility commander. He's one of the fastest in the game, and I still use him in this capacity. He is a very close 4th. I think he could pretty easily swap into 3rd based on your own priorities into the game. And the thing that is so great about Cao Cao is that in the early game, he's great, actually, as a part of a Khan Cao rally for a time. That was one of the best rallies in the game. He is a cavalry, peacekeeping, and mobility commander, which means he's great for barbarians, and the mobility tree combined with peacekeeping actually makes him really good for rallying forts in KVK that are sort of far away. I often used him as a primary more frequently than I used Minamoto as a primary, even though Minamoto is a better damage dealer as a fort primary. There's a bunch of things that I really like about Cao Cao that I just want to call your attention to, and is the reason I put him into 3rd. His active skill does a huge attack reduction and a small march speed reduction with solid damage. He does the most boost to barbarians that you can get in the game, tied, of course, with Minamoto. We like over here the cavalry march speed, and 30% attack is a solid amount of stats. And we love that there is healing and rage restoration on this commander. He would be rated much better if it weren't for the expertise skill, which at one point in time I thought was one of the best expertise skills in the game. Card up in the top if you want to see right when expertise skills came into the game and what I thought of them. It is actually kind of comedic. I think that a net positive 15% of stats to one type of unit is really unimpressive. I'm honestly astonished they've not gone back and reworked this because it's so low compared to like what you get for expertising other commanders in this game. All in all, I think that he's solid in 4th, but could easily swap to 3rd. Now, before we get into who I think is in 3rd place, I do want to mention some solid pairs. I think that Sun Tzu is a pretty amazing, unexpected pair because of the AoE, the damage reduction, and the huge amount of rage gen and damage dealt here. This commander will be phenomenal when paired with Cao Cao. I think that Boudica as a secondary would also be a fine choice. Pelagius primary, Cao Cao secondary looks like the jam. Really powerful, hard-hitting in the open field. A little less maneuverable. If you wanted to use Cao Cao as the primary, then Pelagius secondary, you'd solve those maneuverability problems at the cost of damage dealt. I think that Belisarius is a solid pair if you want 2 very mobile commanders and you're doing Mighty Governor shenanigans, killing farmers. Same is true of Baibars, although if you were using him as a primary, you'd gain access now to the skill tree, which does have some advantages. Overall, those would be my recommendations for epic pairings with Cao Cao. Let's jump into our 3rd pick, which again I think was pretty close with the 4th pick, and that of course is Minamoto, also known as Winamoto, also known as Moneymoto. This commander can be purchased and is actually one of the easiest legendaries to obtain in terms of sort of effort and cost if you had the money to spend on him. I think that he's still got some amount of role in 2020, but it says a lot that he doesn't show up at all in my Sunset Canyon team. With that said, card up in the top if you want to see my video where I talk about whether or not he's good in 2020. I think that he's still the best fort rally lead in the game, especially if you don't need to get there super fast. If you needed to get there fast, like when everybody's rallying level 10 forts at the end of KVK, then you needed Cao Cao primary. But for everything else, there's Minamoto. Minamoto is super hard hitting. He actually does a huge amount of damage factor and has very little utility. I do want to call attention to the fact that his second skill is not as good as Cao Cao's third skill. However, he does have 50% extra damage to barbarians, tied for the most amount of extra barbarian damage in the game, and there is utility in this fourth skill. Warlord is very good. It is deceptively good and easy to forget that it's here. Troops' normal attacks have a 10% chance to increase the damage taken by the target by 30% for the next 3 seconds. There's a reason that at least one Minamoto shows up in world record shattering Soroli Crisis. Card up in the top if I haven't run out of cards that I can offer you at this point when we set the world record, not once, but, twice. So, continuing on, now we get to the last two Legendary Cavalry Commanders. And of course, there's only 2 left to discuss at this point. We've got Saladin and we've got Khan. P.S. Minamoto Pairings. Almost forgot, got really excited. Minamoto Pairings, you could look at Pelagius as a primary or secondary. They both care about rage gen. Pelagius brings that. Boudica secondary would be solid as well. You want Minamoto to be the primary for the talents that you would have in the battlefield. I think Minamoto primary, Belisarius secondary is solid. And either Bybors or Minamoto primary is good too. I would steer you away from Osman because Minamoto doesn't have the rage engine needed, but they're an okay pair if you were in a pinch. All right, the moment you've been waiting for, my friends. Saladin Khan. I get this question more than any other in my live streams, to the point that I actually thought I'm going to record a response and just play it back on a soundboard, and I still may go and do that. Which one is better, and which should you invest in? Now, you've heard me say in my live streams, this is going to depend a lot on your role. They're very close in terms of power, but if I'm forced to rank them, which I will for this video, then at number 2, I am going to put Khan. That's not to say that Khan is a worse investment than Saladin. They're different. Let me talk about why. Khan has the literal very best rage engine in the game, period. His active skill costs 50 less than most commanders, and the second skill is going to reduce that rage cost by another 100, which is very powerful. The fourth skill will also generate more rage when you're less than 50%, which is very solid. Craftsman. And counteroffensive. I don't know what we're doing. It's very solid. With that said, if you're going to use this commander, you're really going to want him to be a primary commander. Here's the build we used in the Soroli Assault. This is something that Khan will show up in, and Saladin does not appear for. Here's a build that's perhaps, here we go, a little more balanced for general fighting and Rise of Kingdoms, especially as we see more archer commanders showing up as the new legendaries cycle in. This is a solid, high damage build where, okay, you got a couple points of flex where you could show up here, but overall you are going to generate astonishing amounts of rage, and we still use Khan, not Saladin, in our Canyon lineup. Now you may be wondering, wait a minute, Chisgule, well then why is Saladin your number 1 pick? Hang tight. Let me show you some pairs and we'll talk about that. I think Khan, Sun Tzu, gangbuster good. Rage gen through the roof. Damage synergies, love it. Khan and Boudica, love it. Rage gen synergies and healing here, love it. Same is true over here with Pelagius. Rage gen synergies, healing, love it. I love what's happening here. I think that Belisarius is fine. He does desperately need a rage engine, and you are going to be doing some solid utility using him as a secondary to Khan. But, just okay. I like Bybars as a pair. You're going to do a lot of AoE damage. Khan is the primary again. And also, I really love Osman as a pair for single target damage. Khan Osman, Khan turns Osman into practically legendary quality as a commander, just based off of this skill here, firing off so gosh darn frequently when Khan is the primary. It's really quite remarkable. So overall, Khan is super solid. If you're investing in Khan, he's a bit easier to work on as well. Max the first skill, then the second skill, and after that, you can take these up to, 1, bring them to 4 stars. You can start leveling them up and using them as a primary. This is very different than our friend Saladin. Let's go get a look at Saladin, who I'm saying is the #1 pick, but again, this depends in part on what you're doing. Saladin is exceptional for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the healing and march speed debuff is super real. Healing debuff especially is very impactful, and the 1700 damage factor is honestly astonishingly good. You're basically having an equivalent damage factor to Khan, but Khan has a chance to fire that skill off again, which is kind of amazing. That's what his expertise skill gives. Saladin is offering you utility in the form of a healing debuff and march speed debuff. There is a huge amount of stats on the second skill for Saladin, and also the third skill is very powerful. Skill damage taken reduction by 30% and counterattack damage taken reduction by 20%. The big downside of Saladin is that you're going to want to max the first 3 skills, yes, all 3, before you start leveling them up. Because you're really not going to want skills to land over here unless you're actually the person rallying cities. So it's going to take substantially more sculptures to get Saladin to a serviceable point, and then you start leveling him up and you use him as a primary. Now, the reason that he's so powerful as a primary is because he has the support tree. Rejuvenate generates 150 rage when an active skill is used, which is really gangbuster. In addition, there is a massive amount of skill damage taken reduction in all of the talents that I've just flashed up onto the screen. Saladin is an astonishingly good commander that offers a huge amount of utility. And if you're not a big T5 beater who's going to be doing tons amount of damage with their Khan, who is a glass cannon, by the way. You focus down a Khan like this. Saladin, on the other hand, is a much more tanky alternative, much more survivable alternative. Now, if you're not that big spender who has all the T5 everything, look, the utility you bring with something like this is very high. I even used Saladin and Joan of Arc as a pairing in my Canyon lineup for a very long time, and until infantry just completely dominated the meta, that was a very acceptable choice and very powerful, quite frankly. The reason is that you're just firing off the active skill so frequently it gets out of hand. And one of the big differentiations between Khan and Saladin is that Saladin really doesn't care about whether or not you're dealing skill damage with your second commander. Khan really would prefer if your second commander had very high skill damage. Of course, spoiler alert, I'm using Khan and Takeda, and it's working great. So that doesn't mean, the rule is hard and fast. And these commanders overall, the two of them, are very, very, very close. Depending on what you want, you pick one or the other. Utility and tankiness, pick Saladin. If you want high DPS and rage gen, which, by the way, at any time they can release a new commander where this becomes busted as a combo, Khan is a really interesting choice. Now, in terms of epic commanders to pair with Saladin, I think that Sun Tzu is exceptional. I mentioned that Joan of Arc is great because Saladin really doesn't care about the skill damage, although you do probably want Saladin to be the primary for the cavalry tree combined with the support tree, rather than the integration tree that you get from Joan of Arc. I think that Boudica is a great secondary. Same reason, you want the support tree from Saladin as a primary. Pelagius, truly exceptional. You're going to generate even more rage and get some healing, and Saladin really did want that healing. If you use Belisarius, you're going to get a ton of value from the utility from this first skill, reducing the attack and defense of the target. If you're a lower spender, I think this is actually a very solid pairing, again, for the utility and support that you're offering the group. For AoE, Baibars is a fine choice as a pair with Saladin. You're going to do lots of AoE damage from that support tree. Not as much as with a Khan, but you'll be a whole heck of a lot more tanky with that support tree. Also, gosh, the support tree has hasty departure, which is kind of amazing. If you're managing sort of one maneuverable march in the field, Saladin is very good as a primary. I also think that for the same reason that Osman was good with Khan, he's not quite as good with Saladin, but still great in that capacity for just doing huge amounts of damage, driven in no small part by this third skill. So hopefully you enjoyed this video where we reviewed the top legendary cavalry commanders and who we would pair with them. A lot of what we're advising here is that you choose one or the other based on what you prioritize. You want utility? Go Saladin. You want huge damage? Commander that's good in the Soroli crisis, but a bit of a glass cannon? Go Khan. Do you want a commander that is really strong for forts and in the open field? Minamoto's a good pick. Do you want a commander that's the fastest combo in the game? Pick Cao Cao. If you want a utility cavalry commander, Takeda's here, and I don't even know what role Attila's going to fill. It could be that he's fine in the open field still. Maybe. We just haven't even bothered to do the testing. Our test results were just so absurdly decisive. And maybe we did something wrong, but they were so absurdly decisive when we were running rallies that, like, I don't know what you do with this guy anymore. I don't even know. He's just a trophy. A trophy, and we've got footage from our KVK Season 3 and that victory, and I guess that's what he's there for. Oh, boy. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. What do you think of the rankings that we gave here? I think they're pretty spot on, and there's a lot of points where it's like, you could do this, you could do that. I would make the argument, and I'm sure there are some number of players who would probably bump our good friend Takeda up to 3 instead of 5. I bet you there are people that would do that. And it could be that there will be more commanders that come into the game that really care a lot about normal attack damage. I do think Saladin Takeda is a sick legendary pairing, offering a huge amount of utility and healing and tankiness. And gosh, I mean, you could almost frontline these guys in Canyon if infantry weren't totally dominating that space right now, which they are, and for good reason. All right, my friends, we're going to head out. Drop a like, and until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom. I bet you all these people are going to be like, Chisgule, you said Khan or Saladin, one's tanky, one's DPS. I did rank them here. I did put Saladin 1, but that, like, but you pick what you want, right? Like, he's 1, but pick what you want. You want DPS, best rage engine in the game, you go Khan. You want tankiness and utility, you go Saladin, right? Like, it's just because he gave him 1 doesn't mean Khan's a terrible investment now. He's great. All right, I'm going for real.